Chess, nonsense, and analysis. So, what are we looking at today, Kelvin?
Yes, Watu, it's an exciting episode. So today we are going to be reflecting on book number 10 of Reflections. And we have our special guest, none other than the author of this special series, Dr. Lyndon Bouah. Dr. Bouah, welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Calvin and Watu. Great to be here, and great admirer of the work that the two of you are doing on chess, nonsense, and analysis.
It's fantastic to have you here, Dr. Bouah. So, your 10th installment will be released soon, coming in March, if I'm correct. And we will just be basically picking your head a bit and diving into what's maybe a bit of origin of the series and what can we look forward to in the next installment. Maybe we should just start off there and let me ask you this. What is Reflections number 10 all about?
So in March last year, the South African Closed Chess Championship took place at Newlands, and I was the joint champion with Dr. Bouah in the South African over 50 section, and we then qualified to play in the FIDE World Senior Team Championship. So to play in that tournament, you must be 50 and older, and the tournament took place in Poland from the 1st until the 11th of July, 2024. So I was captain of the team, and Shabir and I agreed I would play board 1. He was board 2. Alistair Metcalf board 3, and Andre Schutte board 4. So what I've done is I've taken all 36 games that South African players played there, because each of us played 9 games because we had no reserve. And I've analyzed all the games and gave a background of the tournament and of Poland and all our experiences there. But the key thing is the analysis of the games, and also giving the reader of the book possible improvement lessons. And the book is called Improving as an Adult Chess Player, because of course we are adults and we seniors over 50, but the key thing is to try to give improvement lessons, but also to document the games that were played there by the South African players.
Fantastic. I had sort of the privilege of looking at the structure of the book, and I must say that I don't know, how long back I should go to actually remember a book where you read and immediately the author is walking with you, getting the lessons. So you actually are aware that, I'm improving because I'm learning this lesson and I'm being asked this question and so on. So I just wanted to know the structure of the book, are you carrying it throughout? I mean, is it every chapter with lessons and questions, lessons, and improving and ideas of improving?
Yes, in fact, Watu, one of the things, one of the readers of my books is a guy called Cecil Olsen. And Cecil was in fact telling me that one of the reasons why he enjoys the books is that he likes to learn new things. And he wants me, who is an experienced coach, to also put some of my coaching inside of the books that I write. So what I decided to experiment with this time around was, in fact, to draw out from every player games and learnings that we could take. And what I then did is I started from round 1. And we look at Shabir's game, we look at Alistair and Andre, and then my game was the highlight of the first round because I had a good win against a seasoned player, because we lost that game 3-1 against a German team. But every game you could learn from. So what I've then done is I've styled it improvement lessons. So improvement lesson 1 could be develop your pieces much earlier. Don't take gambit pawns unnecessarily. So all of those things I'm then telling the reader, if you wish to improve, because 2024 was a great year for me. I went from 1996 FIDE and I picked up 110 rating points.
Wow.
So that's in one season as a senior player who doesn't play a lot because I don't have the time, but I wanted to make sure that the lessons that I learned also came through. And I just want to say, Watu and Calvin, there were 2 books that influenced me in 2024 in the run-up to Poland. Nigel Short, Winning Chess, and he wrote a fantastic book where he also gave a lot of lessons in his book, less analysis, but more look out for your rook is misplaced or the knight is on. So that was a great book, Winning Chess. And in the second one was a series of books on the Soviet Chess Championship. So it's written, it's 5 books. I've bought the first 3. And what they've done is they then analyze the Soviet Chess Championships from 1921. So I've finished the first 2 volumes and I realized how much I learned just from going through those games that were played at the Soviet Chess Championships, because obviously the analysis was there, but the authors would also say you can pick this up, bishop ending here, a tricky knight ending there on that side. So that's what I try to teach the reader in every game. So there are 36 games from the tournament, but inside the book there's more than 36 games, because I even bring in Polish and South African history. So people may or may not know that Miguel Najdorf won the 1976 SA Open, played in Cape Town. So I brought 3 games of Najdorf into the book to show our connection. And then in one of the later chapters, we have another connection where woman grandmaster Katja Toma scored 9 out of 11 points and came second at the 2014 SA Open. And she sent me a lovely game where she beat Grandmaster Keith Arkell in the British Championship. And so these are just some of our other games that I've also included. And of course, Calvin and Watu, I could not include the Polish Immortal. The Polish Immortal is, of course, Rotlevy versus Rubinstein, played at Lodz, 1907. Rook takes c3, rook d2, and bishop takes e4, and then the mate down at the bottom. So all of that I had to bring in other games besides the 36. So you actually get a wide gamut of things that you could learn and be entertained with as well.
Dr. Bouah, that sounds like quite a unique experience, especially thinking of South African players and chess. So 10th book, you say. This is a significant milestone in your career as an author. Right? So what challenges have you faced while writing about chess, especially with South Africa as the focus?
So Calvin, the one thing that the significant challenge that I've been facing is that in South Africa and Africa, the recording of the games and the capturing of the games is not what it should be. So sometimes our South African and African players would play great events all over Africa, and then I struggle to get the games.
Yeah.
And then I've got to write to individual players and say, listen, you beat you played a lovely game. Can we get the game? And then that person may send the game to me individually, but what you actually want is you need a complete tournament games. So without that, it's difficult to write the history of South African and African chess. South Africa, fortunately, had a chess magazine from 1953 to 1983 called the South African Chess Player. Now, that has assisted me greatly. I've got many of those copies at home, but there are still many tournaments after 83 where the games were not captured. Now, the thing about chess, as both of you would know, is that you must be able to verify things. If somebody says, I won a tournament with 6.5 out of 7, I need to be able to verify that, A, with a newspaper report, or in fact, you showing me the games from that tournament. Now, if you don't give that, very difficult for us to do. So I think for me, that's part of the challenge. And also, not forgetting that www.chessresults only came into play in 2003. So many of the chess results prior to 2003, if you were not present, you may not know who won the tournament. And that for me, so what I'm trying to do is to also bring in some of the results of the 80s and 90s in the pre-internet era. So a lot of people would just say, just Google the result, not realizing that actually we were doing results were being typed out on somebody's home typewriter, not even a computer or laptop, somebody's typewriter. So I then, many times people would find results of tournaments in their garages. older players, and then they would give that to me at tournaments and say, Lyndon, here's a 1987 games or results, and you know what you can do with it. So Calvin and Wato, I actually spend some of my own money in also paying people to update those things and to recreate that. In other words, making the score sheets, making the things in so that it's now legible and readable, and then of course just researching those things. So for me, those are the challenges. That it's a pre-internet era. So that is why a book can take 6 months to 2 years to write, because you may need to verify, and what we would say in academic terms, triangulate the information. Because if somebody says they won a South African championship, let's say they won it 5 times, then I would say, well, I'll first check the records before I put it in the book. Because if I put it in the book, I must be able to stand by it and say, yes, Kobese won in 03. The SA closed in Kempton Park. He won 05 in Bloemfontein, and he scored 9 or whatever. So these are the things that I must be able to verify, so that the reader must know that it's authentic what I put in. So those are the challenges, Calvin. People are generally happy to have the books, but the information to write about that, I've got to be creative and imaginative to be able to put that in.
Thanks, Lyndon.
I'm happy to hear that, because, the thing is, obviously, every time one looks at a chess event story, like I'm talking now historically, because if you think about every event will be a historic event. One obviously wants to always look at the games, because the games for chess are what make up the story. It's like if someone was to talk about in football, some guy who did APC, we need to see at least a footage of the goals, at least, or something, because then we can formulate a picture how good someone was, right? But I also wanted to ask, because I know that every time SA plays, the SA team plays, after the game there'll always be discussions and analysis about the games and so on. And do we get the privilege as the readers of the book to also be part of that? I mean, are you also writing about some of the stories, some of the tales that maybe, only someone who would have been there would have been able to know?
Yeah. In fact, Walter, that's part of the nice thing, is that I write about, in most cases, events where I was personally present, so that I can give the reader that first-hand account. And I mean, there was 1 or 2 where I put my own emotion in. I told the readers in one of the chapters, my board 2 was missing in action. Then I had to send the board 4 to go fetch him. And then board 2 arrived, and board 4 was still looking for him. So these are the things that I'm writing about, because it happened. And of course, you guys would know that at a certain stage, if you're not 3 players at the board, you can't start the match and all of these things. So very, very difficult. So I tell the reader about these things. And of course, in our analysis sessions, which was nightly sessions, we would analyze. And there's a interesting tale that I tell in the book, where one of our players was telling us about this lovely victory that he had, until I pointed out that his opponent missed a mate. And neither he or his opponent saw it in the game. But that's the advantage of obviously analyzing when you're in a group, because you see different things as well. And I think all of us then, the 4 of us, the South African team, we analyze each night after supper, at least for 60 to 90 minutes. And that assisted all of us. And I tell the readers some of those stories. In fact, Calvin Water, there's an interesting story where after a particular round, I can't remember which one, Shabir and I went to the bookstore because we wanted to buy a book, you see. And but we had befriended the people at the bookstore. So there were 2 guys, Jan, and I can't remember the second guy, and there was a lady called Magda. And then Shabir and Jan and the other guy, they were then analyzing a game that Shabir had played in the round before. It's very interesting, that because they were all Polish chess players, they could play, they all 18, 1900s. The very next day, the position that Jan and the bookstore guys analyze, that Shabir appears on Shabir's board.
What?
Appears there. And of course, I'm looking there and I see this position. It's a Sicilian Bishop G5 variation, and everything just as Shabir explained. And there Shabir gets a chance to play. Bishop takes B5, AB, Knight takes that line. And but it was the analysis that Shabir had done in the bookstore with those two guys, Jan and the other guy, and they because they were at the bookstore, they could come into the hall, and then when they came into the hall, they all looked shocked that there was a position that Shabir had analyzed the day before. So I think that type of stories the reader should also get to hear about.
Yeah.
And then of course I speak about the people that I met there as well, Stuart Rubin, and you met Shabalov. I met Grandmaster Shabalov that played for the United States. He was there, and Calvin, you may not remember this, but Watu and I were in the Olympia team in '94, and in the first round we played the USA, and we lost to the USA 3-1. Watu, I think, played Benjamin, if I'm not mistaken, Joel Benjamin, but Charles de Villiers drew with Shabalov. And Shabalov was actually playing in this tournament also. And when we played the United States second team, we played against a guy. Board two was a guy called William Pascal. And then William
Yes.
Pascal says, by the way, I've played Dion Solomons, Kenny Solomon, and Watu Kobese. So he could. So these are the type of stories that's in the book.
Nice.
One of the other favorite little stories, Calvin and Watu, is we play Ireland in round 8. And Shabir then writes his name down and we hands over his score sheet to the other guy. And that guy then writes, but Shabir says, but no, you're not Kevin, and gives a surname because I prepared for other guy with the K from Ireland. So Shabir had prepared for the wrong Irish guy, same surname but different name with a K.
Excuse me, Tata. Excuse me, but did Xavier let the guy know before the game started?
Yes.
Oh no!
So I'm still not sure if Shabir was playing messing with him or if he was being serious because he's saying, no, but you can't be Kevin because I prepared for other guy. So I just left it there and that discussion as well. So now the reader gets the full on whole Polish experience. And let me tell you guys, I actually discovered that South Africa and Poland has a lot in common, and we have history as well. And in the 1940s, in the Second World War, the South African Air Force actually assisted the British Air Force in liberating Poland from Germany at that stage, from Nazi Germany. And some of our South African airmen and army guys were held captive in the concentration camps in Poland. So, and if you will allow me, Calvin, 1 minute to tell an interesting story. There is a rugby player, I'm not going to reveal his name because I want the readers to see it in the book, who actually practiced his kicking in that World War concentration camp, World War II concentration camp, and then in 1949 kicked the winning goals against the All Blacks in 1949.
What?
So guy from Johannesburg, he was in that Polish concentration camp, and he practiced his kicking every day for 2 years, and then that was the only series that the All Blacks lost 4-0 in South Africa because of that guy's kicking, and they don't know that he had trained in Poland for 2 years in that concentration camp.
Amazing story.
Interesting stuff. We should definitely go check it out in that book of yours. And
Sure.
So I've got a bit of a 2-point question here. First of all, what do you enjoy most about writing these chess books? And then secondly, since it's your 10th one, has your are all the books the same in structure, or have you evolved as you've been going along? Are there different ways that you've been writing your books, and what can we expect?
So the interesting thing, this is the 10th book in the Reflection series, but it's my 11th book in total because I co-wrote one with Grandmaster Kenny Solomon, and we've agreed we're going to start his line, and he's at some stage he tells me he'll be ready with book 2 when the time comes. But for me, my writing style has evolved. So the first book, for instance, had many puzzles in. And then in book 2, I wrote about my chess life, 1986 to 2003. So it was chronicling my chess career and interesting things because I was part of that unity process. But as we went along, people started giving me advice. Lyndon, we'd like to see more people's games. We'd like to see photographs in the game, in the books as well, and we'd like to see results of tournaments. And then that's how I then evolved. So that by the time book 4 came along, I wrote a book about Rodney Williams, who was a dear friend of mine. He passed away from COVID. And in book 4, I look at Rodney's games, and he won the South African Police Championship 3 times. So that was interesting because it's unknown chess history. And then when you get to book 5, I write about my experience playing in the South African Closed Championship. I played 11 times in the South African Closed, and in the SA Open I played about 15 times. But I write about that from a historical perspective because what I've then learned, being a historian in my own right, I now want to place on record where the SA Opens were held, where the South African Chess Closed Championships, the Interprovincial, the National Club Championship, because even on the websites, Watu, Calvin, and listeners and viewers, there is no complete record anywhere where all of those things can be found in one place. But in my books, you can now, like you will, I will tell you that the first SA Open Championship was held in 1962 at the Wilderness Hotel in Wilderness. And in those years, you even had top grandmasters that all came to play. And that in 1964, Lothar Schmidt, Grandmaster Lothar Schmidt from Germany, won the SA Open with 11 out of 11. Now, those are the type of things that we need to put in that is not well known. And so my writing style has evolved where I do want to put in the factual things because I believe that you must have that basis and foundation. But people also want to hear about interesting things in the chess world. So when I look at book 6, in book 6, I write about black schools chess in South Africa 1975 to 1994 when the schools chess became unified. Book 7, which was very interesting for me, was I wrote about the Moja tournament that was played in 2023. And there it allowed me to research chess in the Northern Cape. So many people may not know that in 1892, there was 2 joint winners of the tournament. The SA Closed was a guy called Edward and a guy called Rivet. And one of them, Calvin, was from Somerset East and would travel by Oxwagon to Cape Town. But one of the players was also from the Northern Cape. So people don't know that the Northern Cape had chess players playing in the SA Close already in 1892. And as you go through, so the Moja tournament, that book 7 allowed me to research Northern Cape chess. Book 8, which was also a labor of love from me, was I put together a lot of South African chess history, and I called it Poetry, History, and Literature. So in there, I gave you 12 poems written by South Africans about chess. So Tariq Jenkins is in there, Maxwell Solomon is in there. And then I also tell you about the Cape Town Chess Club, which of course is South Africa's oldest chess club, having been formed on the 19th of March, 1885. And then I end off with a lot of individual articles I wrote about. And then I also put down for the reader all the players who have their Olympiad colors for South Africa from 1958 when we played the first Olympiad in Munich, and I took it right through till 2024, where Jan Carstens, Caleb Levy, and others are all in, and I've indicated the players. So far, there's 41 players that have played for South Africa, and Watu and Kenny Solomon are the only ones who have played more than 100 times at the Olympiads. So that's book 8, and it's great from a historical perspective. There's only 20 games in there, by the way, but the history is so important. And then book 9 was very interesting, was an academic study done by a student from UWC called Shahid Tobias. And what Shahid and I did was we combined his academic treatise with games and with other information that I then put together. So each book has got an interesting little tale, but I would venture to say that my writing has evolved because it will improve qualitative wise. And there are different things that I'm now happy to creatively take on that maybe I would have been scared beforehand, but now like book 10, lots of games, over 36 games, analysis and training and lessons I'm putting in, because I do believe that players also need to learn some of the lessons from the top players. And in my next projects that I'm giving myself, I'm also looking at the Olympiad books, because of course our players have played top games at the Olympiads. Many players may not have known that in 2018, Calvin Klaasen beat two grandmasters at the Olympiad in Georgia, and they may not have seen those games. So for me, I want to bring those games and make them alive as well. I often think about Watu's game that he played against Georgiev in 2012 in Turkey, in Istanbul. How many of our South African players realize that that guy was a 2650 in his day? Luke McShane losing to Henry Mohammed Steele. Fantastic games. Gata Kamsky, World Championship candidate, losing against Steele as well. Now, those type of things need to be told, and that's for me how I want to contribute to chess education, Calvin and Watu as well.
Fantastic.
I liked your reflection there on the Moja event, but I want to come back to this book, because when I was looking at it, I felt that the book has got everything for everyone. I mean, obviously, you are basically looking at the player who doesn't have a lot of time, who is over 40, how they will improve. But I also think that, of course, for a young player who's ambitious, there are nuggets there that they can pick up. And also for the trainers who may then want to know how to structure their lessons and where they could pick and so on. But there's one other important part I wanted to ask you. And that is, interestingly enough, after the event in Poland, you personally, of course, you gained a lot of rating points there, but actually every tournament almost after that one, and I'm reminded the latest Moja event, you almost won, actually, the event.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what I wanted to ask is, so obviously you must have picked up things that you worked on and ideas in terms of improving. Do you maybe in this book also put a list of what maybe you think is important for the reader? Is the reader going to be getting this, shortcut, so to speak, now by looking at the book?
Watu, in fact, one of the things that I decided to do in the analysis is to introduce the reader to some of the lessons that I learned and that I took from Poland and that I used in subsequent tournaments. So I've styled something called improvement lessons, and there are 75 of them throughout the book. So I would look at every game that the South African players have played, and then I would make suggestions. And some of them are of practical nature, others are more chess related. And one of the books that I studied in my preparation for Poland was a book written about a grandmaster called Alban Planik. And Planik was a Slovenian grandmaster, and he played the most creative chess. And what was interesting was, in my very first round, I was able to use some of his ideas. So I played chess, Watu and Calvin, different Lyndon. I played an early h4, followed by a rook h3, which players hadn't seen. And when I got back to my room, people were asking, but Lyndon, what type of chess is this? But actually, it was part of the training that I did in the run-up, because once I was nominated as board one, I knew that I had a responsibility to play well, because there's no point in, going to the event. You're paying for yourself to go. It's an expensive exercise. You got to give it your all. And so in that first round, my opponent was 200 rating points above me. But then I used creativity, centralization, and just different preparation. So I tell the reader, download Twig, comes out on a Tuesday, get the mega database. And I tell the reader, as soon as the pairings became available, then I go and I start to prepare for that. So I give some tips on how to prepare. And then similarly, using your experience in the game. There was one game where my opponent asked me for a draw early on, and I could have taken the draw because my opponent was like 150 rating points above me. But I decided, you know what? I've come so far. Let's play. And I was remembering Tal that said, if you're going to draw as white, then you have no business at a chessboard, really. Tal and Fisher used to say these things. But at the end of the day, I've got 75 lessons that I think coaches and players can use to improve their own chess. And when I came back to South Africa, some of my club mates were saying to me, but they didn't understand some of my moves. And I said, yes, you got to unbalance the position if you want to create winning chances also. If you just play normal chess, it may lead to a draw as well, but you've got to create winning chances. So these are some of the nuggets that I feel that I've put in, and I hope the readers will enjoy them and take them to heart as well.
Fantastic, Dr. Bouah. Yeah, so I mean, you've gained a lot of experience writing these books. What advice would you give to aspiring chess writers or young players who wish to make an impact in the world of chess?
I think for me, and I want to say writers, and I want to say even players that are just annotating their games. Now, I've studied the history of the Soviet Union with its chess in particular, and one of the things that they used to say was, you must look for the truth in a position. You must look to see if you've played the absolute best moves. And you'll in the book, when I analyzed, I also had the computer on, and then I would say the computer had proposed one or two different moves from the one that was played. But at the same time, you must then be honest to say that you've chosen a different path for whatever reason. But when you are writing, you must look for, did you play the best move? Was it the best move objectively? Or did you play subjectively a psychologically different move? But you've got to be honest. And that's what I try to bring into my writings. If you're honest to say, actually, I overlooked that. It happens, any player can overlook something, but at the same time, it could have been time pressure. There's different factors. But I think for me, Calvin, being honest in your analysis, also do not insult your opponents and your teammates and so forth. If somebody made a bad move, then they made a bad move in that game. But I can tell you, the very next game, that player may take out the top player. So for me, not to be writing in a denigrating fashion about anybody, because at our levels of chess, anybody can beat anybody if they are well prepared. The computer age has actually brought that closer in that regard. So when I look at a book nowadays or prepare for a chapter, I take my time. I play through the game myself first. I play it normally through on the computer. I make my own analysis. If the opening is well known, it's a Sicilian, Najdorf, all the moves are known, I don't need to commentate on it. But if it's something new or interesting, then I would comment on it and I would freeze and I would look at it. And then I have a library at home. That's one of the biggest in South Africa. I've got over 1,500 chess books. So I'm able to go research if I need to. And Walter was talking earlier about these type of books don't come out a lot. I mean, I've got Fred Reinfeld's books of those years, the American guy. He used to write some of those things. Leonard Barden used to write some of these things in the old days. So I like to look at how they wrote. So I think, Calvin, for the aspiring writer, honesty, make sure of your facts, because you don't want to make up your own facts, and you have to be able to verify. So if somebody says, I won a tournament, you must make sure that they indeed won the tournament. What was the score? Because at the end of the day, people also use your book as a book of record. So therefore, when I say the South African champions are of this, then I've put it down and I've given you a score and I tell you where the tournament took place, so that you can verify those things with different sources. So those are important things. And I think also the last thing, quality is very important. You mustn't rush a book. A book cannot be written in a week or a weekend. You got to take your time. You got to play through things. And Africa doesn't have a great writing tradition. We have a great oral tradition where we tell each other stories. Now, what I'm trying to do is to also create a written tradition where if South African teams travel away, send daily reports. Let us know what is happening. And the same way with a chess book. If you're honest, you write about it, you analyze the games, use the computer, and then also have an editor, somebody that's looking at things afresh with different eyes, because you may miss things because you see it too often as well. So Calvin, that would be my advice to aspiring writers. And please, I encourage everybody, if you can, write about something as well. And Watu, I'm not sure if you had a chance to look at the Moja book, the 2023 one, but there I try to bring in the history of the place. So history is also important, because like you guys know, if you don't know your history, you won't know your future. So that's what I try to bring into the chess world as well. Thanks for the question, Calvin.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Wow. No, I mean, I actually cannot wait to get my hands on the book. And and do you have any other questions that come to mind?
Yeah, maybe I have one more. Or one or two. Okay, I'm gonna make it short. So, okay, the one that's off the bat now that I can remember is that you've had so many additions already. Now the question maybe on a lot of people's mind is there maybe a reflections coming out of maybe Steinert's book, or is there reflections on the league? Is there anything special that's maybe happening in the next 5 years or something that we should hold our breath for?
So Calvin, we are thinking of a Steinert's book. We haven't yet formulated things. We'll still sit down. The club will still sit down, because Steinert's is turning 50 in 2027. So the club will still make that decision. One of the interesting things for me that I've decided to concentrate on is an Olympiad series. And I looked at it the other day. South Africa has played in the Olympiad since 1958, and we have played 22 times. Because,
True.
of course, the Olympiad is held every 2 years. And we skipped 18 years when we were suspended between 74 and 1992. So what has been lost in a sense is because in the early days, I'm going to now call it 92, because that was now for me early days. Those games are not as well known to the South African public, and they don't know that we were playing at top level for a long time. We were probably in the top 2 of the African countries. We've subsequently been overtaken by Nigeria, Egypt, and so forth. But the interesting thing is we were always in the top. And so I'm looking at an Olympiad series that for me it's important that those games, and remember, South African women have been playing since '98. So in a sense, we mustn't forget that we need to bring the women games in as well, because that's important part of our history. So for me, it will probably take me, Calvin and Watu, 6 to 7 years to write up all that Olympiad stories. But you have to start somewhere, and I'm going to start with that. And for me, I'm looking also at the history of CAPSA, because it is unknown history that we need to put in. So I've got that, the history of CAPSA, and then about 6 months ago, before I went to Poland, I also put a book together on my computer that I haven't started analyzing yet, but it's something that I want to do, and may appeal to readers. The book is called Sacrifice, and I've looked at all the games that I sacrificed pawns or pieces and won. And I've actually managed to get to about 70 games at top level tournaments where I've sacrificed. And they're very enjoyable, because you need to have a certain finesse and bravery to sack your rook, play the exchange sacrifice, and play it against top players and win. So that is something there, but it all relates to time because of course I'm a professional civil servant, so time is precious for me. But I enjoy writing, so I'm hoping Calvin, Watu, and listeners and readers to perhaps bring 3 books a year. That's what I think I can do qualitatively. You can't bring out 10 books, then the quality will suffer. You actually got to bring out quality books in that period. So that's what I'm busy looking at for now.
Fantastic. Yeah, I still have one more question. Watu, you have anything still on your side?
No, go for the question. I just, from what Lyndon has actually talked of the Olympiad, that's very interesting, I think. But go ahead.
Okay, fantastic. So, yeah, no, three a year already sounds fantastic, Dr. Bouah. We will certainly be glued in. And so my final question is, Victor Korsnoy, one of the players that whose career was so long, he gave his advice on how to remain at a certain level in your game. He said walking. He did a lot of walking. So I want to ask you, and perhaps the readers will have to go and read the book to find out. But what is the key to longevity? Has there been so for a player of, let's say, my age or a bit younger, do you get a chance to take a break somewhere? Is there hope for you to come back and play in the senior events? Or should you never stop? Or what's the key to your success? Because, I mean, you gained 100 plus rating points in the last year. What should you do? Is there hope for us?
Yeah, Calvin, interesting thing is, so when I came back from Poland, I went to go play in the Moja 2024 tournament. And one of the interesting things in that tournament was I beat Banele Mango. I beat Charlton Maniasta, who both ended in the top 5 in the SA Closed main section. And I beat the winner of the tournament, Matvey Rogov, as well. So 3 players, all over 2,200. And I took them on pound for pound, move for move in that tournament. And I've been having this conversation with many players, but I think there's 2 things that can drive you to still maintain a level. Number 1, you must maintain your passion for the game. And I still maintain my passion for the game. So every day, regardless where I am in South Africa, whether I'm at home in Cape Town, whether I'm traveling, as I'm doing this week to East London and Johannesburg, I do 10 puzzles. I do on chess.com. I go and I check the puzzles, and I still do the puzzle just to keep me, keep my head in that. And of course, I read all the stories on ChessBase and on chess.com. And when they do the analysis, Rafael Laitio and others do the analysis, I follow. And then when big tournaments are on, I actually watch Leko, Polgar, Gustafsson, and the Americans analyze. And I would watch, because you still need to do that. But I think for me, besides the passion, if you want to maintain a high level, you must still have a love for training. And that is why, for me, I've got books at home that I still haven't opened, that is still in their cover, that I bought 2 years ago. But I know that I'll be opening them. So I told you earlier that I studied the first 2 red books of the Soviet Union closed. Book 3 is going to be opened now in March. As soon as I need to get ready, then I want to open that book. And similarly, there are other books that are there. So for me, you have to stay in training. You've got to love training. In order to play well, you've got to train well. So you can't just rock up at a tournament and think I'm going to now compete against the top 10 in South Africa. You got to prepare and you got to train. And I think for me, people mustn't underestimate that. You got to put out the time. So at my house, I've got my chessboard that sits in the study. I've got my books, and I still train. And I don't play many tournaments. I play the league, and I probably play about 5 tournaments a year. But I try to play quality tournaments. And that is why I'm hoping in April, if my time allows, to play the Namibian Open, for instance. That's happening because I want to play new opponents as well. So Calvin, certainly there's hope, but you got to stay in training, do your puzzles, and stay on top of the game. Follow the game where you can, but you can't stay away for 6 months and then just expect to come in and have former glories. You still have to stay in training. And I think that's why if you read my book, you'll see I'm giving those tips, what to do from the puzzles, from the training, and also one of the things that I do regularly is I actually analyze my games, wins or losses, because your openings tend to be repeated. So you got to understand what line you are playing and why you are playing the particular line as well. So you got to know something about everything. So if I play particular opening, then I try to know everything, but you must also know something about everything else also. So you must know opening, back to back. And at the same time, you need to know a little about everything else about different openings. So that would be my advice, Calvin. And I look forward to seeing you guys at one of the tournaments in the near future.
Thanks, Lyndon. Okay, so I think perhaps it's the time of the session that I've been waiting for. It's maybe time for us to have a look at a game of yours, Dr. Bouah.
Sure.
And this game is of course going to be in the book as well, right?
Yes.
So
In
where
fact,
are you taking us? Are you taking us to Poland?
Yes, I'm
that last year?
I'll just minimize my screen quickly. Yeah. So yes, so the game that I'd like the three of us to analyze today is a game that was played in round 8. It is South Africa versus Ireland, and my opponent's name is John Delaney. He was a 4-time Irish champion, and before the game started, he and I chatted briefly, and he, in fact, knew about a other South African champion called Wolfgang Heidenveld. And Heidenveld won the South African Championship 8 times. And then in 1957, Heidenveld moved to Ireland and then also won the Irish Championship. So at a particular stage, Heidenveld was the South African and Irish champion at the same time, because in those years there were a 2-year gap between the tournaments. And then Heidenveld's son actually nowadays also used to play for Ireland in the tournament. And the National Irish League, the B section, is called the Heidenveld section. So Ireland and South Africa has a bit of a connection in that regard. And in this game, I was white and my opponent very experienced. I'd like to analyze this game with you, Watu and Calvin, and the listeners and viewers.
May I please mention something interesting, Doctor, on the Heidenfeld connection? What is interesting is that when I was playing around in Germany, I met a certain gentleman. Okay, that time he was not yet an international master, but he was very strong. I think he was about 2,300 or something. Mark Heidenfeld.
Yes.
And that is Heidenfeld's son. He was actually in Germany when I was there.
Yes.
So we spoke and, this and that. And then afterwards, I met him then at the Olympiad, because then he was playing for Ireland. So I was surprised, because I said, why are you playing for Ireland? Then he mentioned the connection with his dad and everything. And so it's actually very interesting, the story. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
100%.
Interesting stories. So, Lyndon, you got white in this game, right, against Delaney?
Yes, I'm white. Board 1 against Ireland, and
you've got your board open on your side, right?
Calvin, you can move, and then we can pause. I would like to pause on move 5.
Okay, all right. So F5 played, knight C3, G3, bishop B4, and bishop D2. Okay.
Yeah, so that was the interesting bishop D2, because I had felt that I didn't feel like having those double pawns and suffering there for a long time. Knight C6, knight A5, that story. So I was confident that if he captures, and then I would have queen C2 or queen D3 in. So unusual move, but interestingly enough, I saw in one of the games at Tata Steel that bishop D2 also made it in one of the games of the GMs as well. So although it's an old move, it made it come back, but I decided I'm going to go for bishop d2. Fischer also had a bishop d2 story in the Winowa in the French, where he also played bishop d2 against Petrosian and I think Keres. But in this case, I decided I'm going to just play a solid move, if you can call it that.
You know what? Interesting enough, this talk about Bishop D2, it's very interesting that now with the strong computers, actually, if you look at the names of Indian, because, the strong computers are sort of contribute. They are saying they are part to areas which we thought we understood very well. For an example, the strongest computers are frowning, when one plays the King's Indian, they're saying, no, you can't give so much space. And I think if you look also at the developments in the Nimzo Indian, the strong computers are frowning on giving those double bishops. And you start to see that Bishop D2 is all of a sudden all the rage because of the strongest players are using the computers to analyze, and the computer is saying, so, I'm 100% sure. So this Bishop D2, definitely you will see more and more of it in this position, because that's what we are seeing these days, right?
It's a trend, yeah.
There's this trend not to allow the opponent to have your structure, to damage your structure in voluntarily, type of things.
Yes.
Very interesting. Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
That's I think that's what I followed, and he of course played c5. I played the normal a3, bishop takes, which was expected, and then knight e4, which I also expected. Queen d3. I decided to place my queen on d3 rather than c2, still to just give some protection to d3, to c4. He captured, I captured back, and then he goes queen f6. So in this position, he of course, pawn takes pawn on c5 is obviously out of the question, because then after queen takes queen on c3, I just have a damaged pawn structure which nobody is interested in. And of course, it would be called an Irish pawn structure, having 3 pawns on the file. So I decided, no, I'm just going to play a normal move, e3. He then recaptures, and I then say, okay, I'm going to take with a queen. He plays castling, and here he offers me a draw on this move after he castles. So I was sitting there and I looked at the boards next to me. They weren't looking too great. And Ireland was, let's say, outranking us in terms of ratings on all boards. So remember, my opponent here is 2167. I was 1996 at this tournament. So he's also got a good 160 rating points on me. But I decided, you know what? I want to play on. And this is something for the younger viewers. If you've traveled and you have the opportunity, play the game, play it out, don't draw. And I decided, no, I'm going to now play something different. And I played queen takes queen, because I felt, Wato and Calvin, that when he plays rook takes f6, his rook is not in a great position. His rook is not, it's not a normal square for the rook. Let's put it that way. So in my analysis, when I looked at this position, and I probably spent maybe 10 to 15 minutes on this position, and I played something that I think is interesting and correct, and I played this move, knight e2. So I decided that I want my knight to go to b5, to go to d6. But I don't want to play knight f3, because if I play knight f3, then he will play knight c6, and then if I go knight d4, he can exchange. But if he plays knight c6 now, then I go knight c3. And then there's no exchange possible, because if he plays pawn to a6, then, Calvin, if you can just show the arrows there. If he plays pawn to a6, then the dark squares are weak on a6, on a5 and b6 again. So I decided to go for knight e2 as opposed to knight f3, with that subtlety in mind on that side.
It certainly seems like you have a little something going on there as motivation to continue the end game. The weak dark squares, your bishop going to g2 probably looks slightly better than the bishop on c8 at the moment. So definitely, I would say some motivation to continue. Happy to see you continue here. So knight c6 was played, and you go on with your plan, knight c3. And the opponent now decides not to weaken the dark squares, as you mentioned, and plays b6, probably just thinking about finishing the development.
Which is good, And then knight b5 has to continue. And so now I decided, you know what, this bishop and this diagonal is a bit hectic, so I've got to cover it. And I play bishop g2, and now he goes knight a5. And of course I exchange. So let's just pause here. So now the knight is lying on b7, and the knight kind of covers d6.
That fianchettoed knight is covering the
same time, the
squares.
knight is fianchettoed, yeah. and I just want you to note that this is move 17, that the knight is on b7. So we will keep an eye out for that knight.
Right.
I now decided to play rook d1.
Okay.
I decided not to castle, because if I castle queenside, then my c4 pawn will be weak. So I can't castle, and in a rook c8, then that pawn would fall later on. So rook d1 allows me immediately pressure on the d file. There's a backward pawn on d7, and I develop with tempo. That's what I feel. That is consistent as well. My opponent now, of course, doesn't really have a move. He's got to defend rook f7. I now decided that it's time that I unite my rooks, but I feel that I don't need to necessarily castle, and I played the interesting move, king e2. Now, what is interesting about king e2? If you have time, Watu and Calvin, there's an interesting game played in round 1 of the 2018 Olympiad between Andrew Kayonde and Ivanchuk, and similar type situation, and Kayonde also played king e2. So king e2, you keep your king in the center. If there's no chance really of a checkmate or it being attacked, so king e2 covers f3, d3, and just stays in the center, because we are in an end game. That's how I felt. There's no danger for me at this stage.
Nice. I like it. King e2, nicely centralized. So king f8, black
My
tries to get his
opponent
king.
now follows suit.
Yep.
And I decide, let's develop. Yep.
Let's
He
include
now
the
goes
h1
as
rook.
well. Yep. And then the rooks come in.
Ooh.
My opponent goes back.
Okay. The
And then
kings.
I decide to play b3.
Aha.
So b3 is an interesting little move, because if he plays knight c5, coming forward to attack b3, then I get knight d6 with a tempo.
Mm-hmm.
And the rook has to move. Wherever the rook moves to f6 or e7, then b4 will put pressure on the knight, and the knight cannot go back to b7, because the knight on d6 is then covering b7 also. So a small little move, but Karpov always used to say you can play quiet moves as well.
I like b3 because, I feel after king d8, if you look at the position, both the opponent's rooks are misplaced, really. The rook on f7 is misplaced. The rook on a8 is definitely not in the game. So it would be tempting to play, instead of b3, say b4, with the idea of restricting the knight. But I think that idea allows a5. And then all of a sudden the rook on a8 is in the game. So I think the timing is also extremely important. And it's interesting that, I think b3 shows good form, because if you think about it, I think we all can remember situations where we had a good position, but you're not necessarily in crisp form.
Yeah.
And you make a certain move, but then after the opponent makes the response, you think, but that's so logical. Why did I allow this? Because so I like this b3 because it highlights to black the difficulty of the placement of the pieces, and I really like b3.
Yeah, classy move over there to b3. Okay,
No,
so
thanks.
the opponent's itching here, Dr. Bouah. He plays a6.
a6, yeah, the knight has to be kicked at some stage. So I opted not to play knight d6 because I felt that the knight b7 is the worst piece on the board.
Yeah.
So I went knight d4.
Keeping the pieces on the board, threatening knight takes e6.
Knight takes e6.
Yeah. So king c7 played?
Yep. And now I now play b4.
Yes.
Because now I'm restricting the knight.
Yeah.
Because, of course, if you play knight d6 now as black, then knight takes e6 check will win a pawn.
Right.
So the knight still cannot move.
Right.
So we've just got that. So my opponent now opts to play pawn to d6.
First e5, right? First e5,
Yeah,
kicking
e5,
the knight, and then
knight
d6.
f3.
Right.
Yeah.
So now it's again assessment time, and this is what I tell the readers. Each couple of moves, you've got to assess the position. Now, if you look closely, the pawn is now on d6, and that means the knight cannot move to d6. The pawn of white is on b4. The knight cannot move to c5. The knight cannot move to d8 because then d6 will fall. So in a sense, that fianchettoed knight that got there on move 17 is stuck now because it has to defend d6 and it cannot really come out because it's restricted. However, my knight is also not the greatest piece because it needs to find weaknesses.
It's free
It needs
to
find
maneuver though.
weakness. Yes, so I decided to play something that I thought was inspirational, and I now played e4.
Interesting stuff. Oof.
I felt that if he takes, f takes e, then knight g5 attacks f7, h7, and e4, and when the knight recaptures on e4, then I've got pressure on d6.
Yep.
Nice.
And the knight on e4 would also be defending f2.
Everything's covered. Yeah.
Everything's covered. So e4, a nice little move just to unbalance the position, but at the same time, I'm opening up for the knight now because the rooks are on good squares, but the knight also needs to find its place in life. So my opponent now played h6, and I captured. And now knight h4 gains a tempo. And my opponent has to go back, and now I play knight g2. It's because now my knight is heading to e3 to go to d5.
Yep.
Nice.
So that's my knight maneuver there, Mr. Kobese, that I felt was important to get the knight into the game correctly.
Yep.
My opponent now goes rook a to f8. And of course, I got to move king e1. So now the rook covers f2, and my opponent now plays king c6. And now it allows my knight to come into the game.
Let's if we go back here with the king on c7. Yeah, I mean I think if your opponent lets you play knight e3, if I was playing black, I would think, okay, the game is as good as lost, right? I mean, of course, black is in serious trouble, but I think the last throw of a dice I would play as black is d5. With the idea that, okay, if c takes d5, play knight d6.
Knight and d6, yeah.
Okay, if the knight comes to e3, it can't go to d5. Okay, I'm lost. But at least practically I have something, right?
Yep.
But if I play king c6, I think I'm going to get squeezed now because all of white's pieces are really good and my knight is really bad. And, you know, it's going to be a squeeze, so...
Maybe that was the best practical chance.
Practically. I mean,
difficult to do it though.
Good chance there. Absolutely. No, well spotted there, Watu. So he doesn't do that. He has king c6, and I now go knight e3. So notice that the knight has improved itself by moving to the square next door to it.
Wow.
Yeah.
On that one.
Nice.
And now he plays rook f3. Now, I must tell you guys that I've been studying the moves of rooks nowadays, and I realized that the rook on d1 is asking me, what is its purpose in life? Because the rook on d2 is defending f2 and keeping an eye on d6, and I decided now I'm going to try something different. So I just want you to look at this maneuver for a moment. I play now, Calvin, a rook b2.
Yeah, I think this is also an interesting moment because it's almost like white has got everything he wanted, and now you must actually find a concrete plan of breaking through, which is a lot of times easier said than done.
Not easy.
Rook b2.
So the rook b2 also threatens in some lines pawn to b5, check, and knight d5 to pick up b6, eh? Because remember, if the knight goes to b5, then b6 may be lost because it can't be defended by another pawn. So I'm making a small threat, but I actually have a different idea in mind. So just play with the next two moves: king d7, rook d5, king e6, and then I come back.
So the rook on d1
the rook on d1 he was complaining, but now you've improved his life a little bit. Yeah. He's happy now.
Nice.
Exactly. So he's happy now.
Yeah.
So that's why in this book the rooks play an important role from the first round already. The rook c to f8. So my opponent goes rook f8.
Rook to c8,
and then I take the chance to play king e2.
Wow, the pressures of f2.
Yes. and then he goes back again, and then I go back again.
C8.
He goes to again.
A draw offer.
Silent
draw
draw.
offer. But I say no. Let's go king f1.
Okay.
My opponent now goes h5, and I go king g2.
Interesting that you are improving every little piece. First it was the knight, then it was the d1 rook, and now it's the king again that you are slowly improving.
My opponent now goes there, and I go h4 because I take control of g5.
Squeeze.
So g6, and now we are getting to move 40. My opponent has about 3 minutes left, and I now play rook 5 to d3. Because if you look closely, knight d5 will pick up b6.
Threat.
Yeah, knight d5 picks up b6, and then even if you play b5, I capture, and knight c7.
Nice.
Nice.
And my a3 is covered.
Nice.
Yeah. So my opponent now plays b5. He now move 40, just been reached. He plays b5, and I say, thank you, pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn, and there the rook goes to find itself back to d5, still restricting b7, and d6 is under threat. So my opponent now goes rook 3, f7. And of course, I pick up the pawn. The rook takes b5. No reason why not. And now my opponent attacks on the a file, and I have a chance to play knight c4. And my opponent now played rook c7. Now, in this position, Calvin and Watu, I must tell you that I was thinking I had a bit more time than my opponent, and I noticed something interesting in this position. And what I noticed was that I'm a pawn up, so that's the first thing. And there are 2 pass pawns on the queen side, but I also realized that there may be a possibility of an exchange sacrifice in this position. And when I was calculating, I was thinking of a game that Watu played in round 1 at the Moja tournament in 2023, game that I had analyzed in my book. And in that book, Watu had sacrificed the exchange to unbalance the position. I felt I could do the same here, because if I unbalance the position, then I could possibly win 2 or 3 pawns of black. And then I would have a knight and a rook versus 2 rooks, but he would have a pawn maybe on e5 and h5, and I would still have 4 pawns at that. So after having studied exchange sacrifices and the like, I now decided that it was time, and I now played rook takes b7.
Oh, okay. Let's see fireworks.
Brave move.
Yeah, it's easier to give up your rook for a bishop, right? But when you have a knight left instead of the bishop, sometimes not so easy.
Yeah, my opponent captures, and I take on d6 because I felt now if my opponent plays king f7, then of course I play knight takes e5 check.
Yep, with check.
And I pick up, and then g6 will fall, and then h5 would probably also fall. So I get enough pawns.
King e7.
G6
if he plays king e7, I still play rook takes g6, and then I'm threatening on the 7th.
Yep.
And e5 is falling.
Yeah. So the opponent felt compelled to go forward.
He then goes forward, and now another assessment time, because all of a sudden I'm realizing, but there's a mate in the air, because g5 is covered, f6 is covered, the only square not covered if I play knight e3 check is actually e4. So why don't I play pawn to f3?
Just closing the mating net there.
And the mating net, now knight e3 check.
Yep.
My opponent now plays e4 to cover the square e5 to open it, and I then gently push forward. Because knight e3 would now be mate.
Yep.
And my opponent now plays e3 to
so
open that square
continues to march.
And then my king goes forward to take control of g4 and
Beautiful.
e4.
Again, e4.
I'm surprised your
against,
opponent
and
didn't play E2 now.
no, so now my opponent has no move left. He has to give up a rook, and he elects to play a rook e7. And of course, I play now knight takes e3, check, force move, takes, rook takes a3, rook d3, and rook e7 or a7, rook d5 check, king f6, king goes up the board to d4, rook a3, the rook goes to g5, defending and attacking g6, rook a1 and b5, and of course any check will just allow king c5, b6, and the standard building a bridge maneuver will take place. So in this position, my opponent resigned, and I felt this was one of my best technical games that I've
Very
played
nice.
in a very long time.
Beautiful squeeze.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, it was definitely worthwhile playing on there, and
Yeah.
very, very nice positional game there. I love it. So this is one of many games that you will see there in the book, right? So I'm sure there's plenty of gems in there. So I'm certainly
Yeah.
looking forward to getting my hands on this book.
Yeah, same here.
No, thanks, Watto and Calvin. And I think this is the type of chess that South Africans can play. We shouldn't stand back for anybody. You must prepare and you must be brave. And I mean, I went for the exchange sacrifice and it worked. And even if he didn't play King F5, I probably pick up enough pawns to give me over enough compensation as well. But I think for me, the fact that my opponent was rated, as I said, 160 rating points above me, ratings means it's just an indication of previous play. What you must do is to play the position and to play through it and have the confidence to in your own ability to also play through these type of games as well, and to play technically correct chess. Because I think I'm fortunate, Walter, that my opponent didn't find pawn to d5, but at the same time I also felt that I had some nice maneuvers, rook to b2 to d5, knight h4 to e3, king f1 to g2. All of those things came from those studies of those books that I used in my preparation. So that's how I felt about this game.
Fantastic.
Wow, nice game. Yeah, I mean, I really cannot wait, because then, in the book one will have, of course, most or more examples like this, and a chance to improve not only the technical side. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a fantastic book, and thank you for writing, because we need actually these historic documents. We've lost so many games over the past years, SA Opens and so on. So it's needed. And
sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Walter.
Yeah, no, also from my side, fantastic stuff, Dr. Bouah. We certainly needed. We have to start somewhere. There's endless games that were lost, but I think you are on the right track here, and we can smile and look back one day at these books when we are all a bit older as well. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for joining us on the channel, Dr. Bouah. As always, you are not a stranger on my shows usually, so we all know Dr. Bouah for his reflections. Happy that he's joined us here at Chess Nonsense and Analysis. And to the viewers, I hope you enjoyed it. Dr. Bouah, do you have any final words before we sign off?
Yes, I must just say that I actually used Chess Nonsense and Analysis in my bibliography. So you guys are already there as a YouTube channel, because I indicated that while the tournament was on, you guys were also analyzing the game. So when I did the bibliography for this book, I also put down the YouTube Chess Nonsense and Analysis, Calvin Klaas and Walter Kobese. So I don't know if that's a first, but certainly you guys are as a YouTube channel in the bibliography for people to also research if they even wanted to see some of the other games that you guys have analyzed as well. So Calvin and Walter, from my side, thank you for having me. And if anyone is interested in the book, I will be launching in the first 2 weeks of March, and people can contact me, lyndon.bouah@gmail.com, the simple one as that, and then engage with me as well. The cost will be 300 Rand. Thank you, Walter and Calvin.
Thanks, Dr. Bouah. Thanks, Watto. So to the viewers out there, don't forget to, if you like this episode, don't forget to like, share, comment, and smash that subscribe button. And we will see you for the next one soon. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks all. Bye.